Hey, what's going on? This is Ryan, and this is Creationist Science Fails number 2. Now, this video is going to differ from the previous one because it's also a response video to another video. I think it's by a YouTuber called PP Simmons Fish Sign. Now, it is an older video, yes, but it is the perfect example of your average stereotypical creationist cluster of terrible arguments. Now watch, in awe, at the stupidity of this apologetic piece of manure and my responses to it.
In an article in Bioscience titled, "How Did Sex Come About?", the author, Julie Schechter, wrote, "Sex obviously occurs everywhere in nature, yet sex remains a mystery to researchers. Why sex? Sex takes much longer and requires more energy than simple cell division. Why did a process so blatantly unprofitable to its earliest practitioners become so widespread?"
Well, if you had done some actual research, you would know that there are many benefits to having sexual reproduction in a population. For example, greater genetic diversity allows more opportunities for favorable traits to occur so that natural selection will take place. Yes, there are other benefits, just research them instead of shoving your nose into the defecation of creationist sites. Jeez.
The evolution of sex and its accompanying capability of reproduction is not a favorite topic of discussion among most evolutionists.
Well, I'm an evolutionist and I'm tackling it. So what exactly is your point?
Because no matter how many theories they invent, and they have contrived several of them.
I think I see what you're getting at. And you're not going to provide a single one of those theories, are you?
The evolutionists still must cross the inescapable hurdle of explaining the origin of and the purpose of the first fully functional female and the first fully functional male necessary to even begin the process of sexual reproduction.
Okay, that's a pretty stupid argument. First of all, there are benefits to sexual reproduction. I named a huge one. If that's not enough, there are plenty of others out there that you can easily find if you did some honest research. And the second part of that is suggesting that you believe that sex started out with two organisms in the evolutionary view. That's a very ignorant position to take. Absolutely nothing in real science would even suggest that sex began with both a male and a female organism in the same population. There are many organisms that are still around today that naturally, I'm not talking about hermaphrodites, but I'm talking about naturally, have both male and female reproductive organs. And many theories regarding the gradual specialization of tissue in early organisms completely supports this perspective. It is very possible to speculate that sex originally was a process that took place within the same organism, and the resulting genetic diversity caused immensely larger counts and scales of evolution to take place, possibly including the development of a single gender per organism, which has the benefit of even more diversity and offspring. This is all common sense, Simmons. Come on.
While various evolutionary theories attempt to explain why sex exists now, they simply do not explain the origin of sex, a true evolutionary conundrum.
I believe I just offered a somewhat substantial explanation of the origins of sex in the evolutionary perspective. So it isn't really a conundrum. Now perhaps the creationists have the conundrum, because they have to explain why the original male, mostly known as Adam, would have all the sex organs before the creation of Eve. Now, since the paradoxes associated with omniscience render their God not to be so, there's no real logical explanation for this. But that's a subject perhaps for another time.
Biology textbooks on origins illustrate how amoebas evolved into various intermediate organisms, which then evolve into amphibians, and then reptiles and mammals, and eventually humans. Yet we never are told exactly when or how independent male and female sexes originated among so many of the millions of species.
Well, the only way we could really do that is to go back in time, which we cannot do, since we really only have the fossils to work with in reference to the earlier species. Determining whether that species had individual genders or had both genders per organism or reproduced by one of the many asexual methods is nearly, if not impossible. Although in regards to the very simple description of evolution you gave, that lists humans separate from mammals, common sense would suggest that sex developed in the intermediate species. The very fact that you even included that already shows how little you critically think on matters before you profess your views about them.
But the truth is that somewhere along this evolutionary pathway, both the male and female gender were required in order to ensure the further existence of a particular species.
Yep, you are definitely going to go with the notion that sex requires both one male and one female. How predictable.
So how do evolutionists explain this? When asked to answer questions such as, from where did males and females originate, or what is the evolutionary origin of sex, evolutionists fumble around for an answer. Different evolutionists give different answers, but they simply do not know. Consider the depth of the problem. How could nature randomly evolve a female member of a species that produces eggs and is internally equipped to nourish a growing embryo, while at the same time randomly evolving a male member of the species that produces sperm cells able to mobilize themselves within the reproductive organs of the female until they unite with the egg? And how is it that these eggs and sperm conveniently evolved so that they each contain half the normal chromosome number of somatic cells?
The perspective you used was not only idiotic, but all other points you made surrounding it were pretty dumb and devoid of reason as well. Your lack of analytical ability is very apparent when you talked about the gametes being haploid. To explain this simply, there are cells called germ cells. These cells undergo meiosis, which could have easily evolved from mitosis if you look at the two processes side by side. What makes meiosis different from mitosis is that the resulting cells of the first round of division will undergo another, but without the duplication of genetic information. Not to mention that the fusion of gametes is a completely natural biochemical process. When an egg chemically recognizes a spermatozoon by the zona pellucida or the vitelline envelope, the chromosomal enzymes will break down the envelope. This allows the plasma membranes of the two gametes to fuse. There's a lot more to this process than just what I've described, so I'll leave you a link in the description to a helpful resource that will educate you on the subject if you wish to pursue it further. But back to my original point. You automatically assume far too many details in your straw man.
Evolutionist Dr. Graham Bell, in his book, The Masterpiece of Nature, The Evolution of Genetics and Sexuality, describes the dilemma in this way. Sex is the queen of problems in evolutionary biology. Perhaps no other natural phenomena has aroused so much interest. Certainly none has sowed as much confusion. The insights of Darwin and Mendel, which have illuminated so many mysteries, have so far failed to shed more than a dim and wavering light on the central mystery of sexuality, emphasizing its obscurity by its very isolation.
To be fair, I guess this video wouldn't be a genuine creationist video without some quote mining. Why is it that the next several sentences and paragraphs further explaining the position were omitted? Hell, when I continued to read the book, I realized that it explained quite a bit regarding the position of evolution and sex. So let me ask, did you actually read any further, Simmons? Hell, did you even actually read the book? Read even that part? Or did you find it on a creation site?
Renowned evolutionist Philip Kitcher noted, despite some ingenious suggestions by orthodox Darwinians, there is no convincing Darwinian history for the emergence of sexual reproduction.
Here, why don't I finish that up for you? However, evolutionary theorists believe that the problem will be solved without abandoning the main Darwinian insights, just as early 19th century astronomers believed that the problem of the motion of Uranus could be overcome without major modification of Newton's celestial mechanics. The comparison is apt. Like Newton's physics in 1800, evolutionary theory today rests on a huge record of successes. In both cases, we find a unified theory His problem-solving strategies are applied to illuminate a host of diverse phenomena. Both theories offer problem solutions that can be subjugated to rigorous, independent checks. Both open up new lines of inquiry and have a history of surmounting apparent obstacles. The virtues of successful science are clearly displayed in both. The book continues on with this analogy, explaining how evolution has overcome many similar obstacles in the past. Very obvious quote mine. And why don't you spout out the name of the book, Simmons? Oh, that's right, because it's Abusing Science, the Case Against Creationism. Letting people know what the title is would give away the quote mine. An ironic anecdote I want to mention is that Kitcher, the author, explains how creationists quote evolutionists out of context in the book. Amazing, right?
Evolutionists continue to freely admit that the origin of gender and sexual reproduction still remains one of the most difficult problems in biology when viewed from a purely evolutionary model. In his book, The Cooperative Gene, published in 2001, evolutionist Mark Ridley wrote, "Evolutionary biologists are much teased for their obsession with why sex exists. Sex is a puzzle that has not yet been solved. No one knows why it exists."
Yes, but we are making advancements towards solving it. Also, it's not nearly as big of a problem as you would like to think it is. But more importantly, we don't know, therefore God, is one of the worst arguments you can make.
Some evolutionists have proposed a simple solution by suggesting that inheritance and sex were a historical accident, a kind of accidental holdover from the era of a single-celled organism. They claim that the maintenance of sex is therefore a non-scientific question that leads to intellectual mischief and confusion. But this would imply that sex is useless and that it has been retained through the years merely by accident. Even evolutionists realize the necessity and the complexity of sexual reproduction.
There were multiple things wrong with that bit. First, you have just defeated yourself when you said the following.
Even evolutionists realize the necessity and the complexity of sexual reproduction.
You described sex as necessary. I can't believe you would say that considering the position you are holding in this. Also, the whole complexity thing is a result from something called development over time. This entire video, you have been suggesting that sex, in the evolutionary perspective, would have just appeared in the manner we see it today. I do you a huge favor by calling you ignorant. But on to the other things that were wrong with that portion of the video. First, well, for this, I definitely wouldn't consider inheritance an accident. That's just based upon common sense. But in regards to sex being accidental, that isn't necessarily the norm among evolutionists, but it isn't actually an implausible hypothesis. As I explained before, if you look at the process of mitosis along with meiosis, it is very evident that meiosis could have developed from mitosis, whether this be by some genetic disruption in the cell cycle or by some other mutation. It still remains uncertain, but not necessarily false seriously due.
Evolutionists have practically been forced to concede that there must be some advantage to a system as psychologically, physiologically, and energetically complex as sex.
Yes, as I have already said, there are advantages.
Mark Ridley admitted when he wrote, "It is highly likely that sex has some advantage, and that the advantage is big. Sex would not have evolved and been retained unless it had some advantage." Yet finding and explaining that advantage seems to have escaped the evolutionist.
I explained a huge advantage towards the beginning of the video. Did you even bother to do a single web search for the advantages of sex? Hell, didn't you learn about the advantages in high school biology?
Sir John Maddox, who served for over 25 years as the distinguished editor of Nature, the prestigious journal published by the British Association for the Advancement of Science, authored a very telling book entitled What Remains to be Discovered. in which he addressed the topic of the origin of sex, and stated very honestly, the overriding question is when sexual reproduction itself evolved. Despite decades of speculation, we do not know. The difficulty is that sexual reproduction creates complexity of the genome and the need for a separate mechanism for producing gametes. The metabolic cost of maintaining this system is huge, as is that of providing the organs specialized for sexual reproduction. What are the offsetting benefits? The advantages of sexual reproduction are not obvious.
Of course they are not obvious. First of all, we need to stop looking at this as if it were exactly how it is now. Seriously, like I said before, development over time. Second of all, we need to do a bit more critical thinking on the matter. Use what you have in here, not what comes out of there. You obviously have failed to accomplish either of these tasks.
The fact that the advantages of sex are not obvious is well known, but not often spoken of within evolutionary academic circles. As it turns out, the common survival of the fittest theories cannot begin to explain the high cost of first evolving and then maintaining the sexual apparatus, organs, and functions. Sexual reproduction requires organisms first to produce and then maintain reproductive cells, sperm and eggs. There are a myriad of other interconnecting considerations when contemplating the whys and hows of sexual origins. For example, in sexual organisms, problems can arise regarding tissue rejection between the mother and the newly forming embryo. The human immune system is vigilant and seemingly very intelligent in identifying foreign tissue. Yet the evolutionist contends that the human reproductive system has selectively evolved. This elaborate, intelligent, pervasive, and, as they put it, expensive method of reproduction. So here is the conundrum. There is no naturalistic explanation that can account for the origin and maintenance of sex, sexual gender, sexual organs, sexual reproduction, and sexual interconnectivity to other body systems. It is, in fact, a scientific observation, based upon observable and demonstrated evidence, that the intricacy, complexity, and informational content associated with sexual reproduction simply demands the conclusion that sex is neither a historical accident resulting in evolutionary baggage, nor is it a product of naturalistic evolution itself, but rather sex is the intentioned design of an intelligent creator.
Bravo. Bravo. You sure had quite the laughable conclusion based around the laughable arguments. I could pick apart what you said there like I've done throughout the entire video, but since it's based entirely on your incorrect points made previously, that I've already picked apart, and also anyone with half a brain could see how your example, especially with the immune system, is terrible, I'm gonna wrap this video up. Hey, thank you so much for watching the video. If you liked it and didn't think I was a total dumbass, please give it a like, share it, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this as well as other things that are done on this channel. See you later.